Hello on YouTube, on Twitch, and welcome to another episode of my Singularity Let's Play series. This is Northstar. Hope you're well, are taking care of each other, and being kind to yourselves. For those new to my channel, welcome. Returning viewers, welcome back. If you haven't before, check out my YouTube channel page where you can find all the previous videos in this series and all my other series in playlists organized from oldest to newest. There is a lot to discover there. A lot of games, over 36 games, over 60 playlists, over 200 videos. Check it out. Maybe you'll find something you like better than this. This is a game, Singularity, that tracks kind of the evolution of life on Earth and humanity and into the future, all the way to, as the name implies, the theoretical singularity. It is also a clicker. Some may not like that. It's very low key and it gives me a chance to just talk about whatever's in my mind without having to put too much thought into the game, which is good because, as it turns out from a neurology visit, the part of my brain, executive functions that can sort stuff into memory, is impaired speed-wise. This is possibly due to what the doctors think is long COVID, or possibly other things that cause brain fog. It's come to my attention it's possible that symptoms have been chalked up to long COVID that were in fact due to other diseases, such as I've had untreated obstructive sleep apnea for a very long time, so there's a very high chance of pulmonary hypertension as a result. Pulmonary hypertension can cause brain fog just like long COVID can. Also, my PCP decided to work me up to check for lupus, which also causes a lot of the same symptoms, including brain fog that I've been experiencing, though that may be indirectly through the pulmonary hypertension that lupus also causes. Not only obstructive sleep apnea, but lupus can both cause pulmonary hypertension, so it would fit, especially since I've been showing symptoms of pulmonary hypertension with the dyspnea and stuff, and patterns that aren't necessarily congruous with other explanations. In fact, I've been to the ER now 6 times in a little over a year. There was almost a 7th time, but when the paramedics arrived, it stabilized, and I'm like, no, I'm not gonna go. And I didn't get worse again. Like after that, that actually happened about a month ago when I was in the ER, where second time I end up in the ER 3 times a week, but the second time I called for ambulance and then I stabilized when the ambulance arrived. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna go. But then I got worse like an hour later, like much worse, and I had to go. So they actually even sent the police with the ambulance that time, probably to force me to go if, they thought that I was being unreasonable and not taking adequate care of my health. They can sometimes force you. There's ways in a situation like that, if they decide your judgment is off, such as due to, your brain not getting enough oxygen because of a cardiac thing that was gone. And indeed, it probably was cardiac. But, anyways, 6 times a year is a lot. The last time I was traveling to visit my grandfather, whom my mother got word of might have been dying. So we went to go visit him. Turned out he was better than she had gotten somewhat, thankfully, overblown reports. Although he's probably not going to last another year, but he wasn't like right on his deathbed, which is, I guess, the way that his extremely low body weight had been portrayed. And he is all skin and bones, a skeleton. He doesn't have much time left for sure, but he wasn't about to die that second. But anyways, we went to visit him, celebrated his birthday, because this happened right around his birthday. And then on the way back, we stayed at a hotel before going back. It was supposed to be early that next morning, and I was getting really bad chest pains at night. And I've been getting chest pains on the way down. And the thing that actually helped was first getting up and stretching in the car ride, but then that stopped working very well. And clearing the back seat out, which my mom helped me with, which is very nice of her. She actually came up with the idea, because I mentioned that what would I do at home when I get these, because I had sometimes gotten this before. I lay down flat with my legs raised, and so we did that, and it actually helped a ton, which isn't congruent with, say, oh, I don't know, acid reflux, where lying flat would make it worse. That said, right now I've been having past couple days the acid reflux from hell, but that wasn't what was happening then. When I end up in the ER on the way back, for sure. This feels different, and it almost certainly is different. Still not fun, though. It's a different type of chest pain, not one I would go to the hospital for, but still miserable. Yeah, and then when I had the ER, my mom actually sat there and waited in the waiting room with me. I didn't call an ambulance since she was there. I had her drive me. I explained, if I was an EMT and someone called like this, given the exact symptoms now I was feeling, I'd probably transport them without lights and sirens, low priority. They need to be checked out, but it's not so urgent that, And so I'm just like, just take it slow to the ER, And, she did. She got a little flustered, missing some turns, but so she clearly wasn't completely calm. But it's safer that way, and it wasn't urgent. But anyway, she waited in the waiting room. Like, you can just go home, go back to the hotel and get some sleep, so that we can, because they'll probably just keep me a couple hours and do some tests. And if I'm not about to keel over, they'll probably discharge me. She insisted on waiting there in the waiting room for me, with me, which was really nice. And I actually tried to thank her a bunch, and she was like, "Don't thank me. Any parent would have done that." Unfortunately, any parent, not necessarily. There are a lot of shitty parents in the world. And indeed, I was a little bit concerned, because she'd done some things that are really not cool, like a year and a half ago. But said things that were really not cool. But yeah, no, this had me impressed. I don't care if any parent would have done it. It was still a really nice thing, and I kept thanking her. And if she ever ends up listening to this, thanks, Mom. I really do appreciate that. Something I'll remember pretty much forever. Because, it's scary going to the ER and all this, even if I know that chances are they're just going to discharge me after running up tests. I suspect it was an exacerbation of pulmonary hypertension, which they're not going to see in they're not going to see in an EKG, and they're not going to see in a chest x-ray unless it's really bad. And so that's like all they ever do. You probably also won't see it on an echocardiogram unless it's really bad. That's, echo as opposed to EKG. That is where they're using ultrasound, cardiac ultrasound. Probably not going to see it there either, which they don't usually do in the ER. But you can see if there's like a really bad pulmonary valve regurgitation or tricuspid valve. And I actually do have trace pulmonary valve regurgitation. I know this from a more routine cardiac ultrasound recently, which is consistent with pulmonary hypertension. And indeed, that's how I even came up with considering that it could be it. And then when I was looking up what could cause that, and then symptoms are all consistent with things I've been dealing with, like brain fog, leg swelling, severe fatigue, difficult shortness of breath, chest pain. It all matches perfectly. And I know I have diagnosed obstructive sleep apnea that's untreated, so I know there's a very high chance of pulmonary hypertension with that. I've been told that before, and I remember that when the doctor was trying to encourage me to get a CPAP. But now the sleep study is missing from my medical records, although there's records in doctor's notes, because the doctors are trying to convince me to get a CPAP. So there's records so there's no question I'm not imagining or something. I definitely had a sleep study. It was definitely positive for sleep apnea, and it's definitely completely missing from my medical records now. which is weird and suspicious, and I don't know why it would disappear like this. But I even talked to a doctor who had it in their notes, and they're like, I don't know why it disappeared. That's the strangest thing. It should be there. So I was talking to the neurologist. I think he was associated with the Long COVID Center, who I think were the ones that ordered the sleep study. So, yeah, he would have known well that I'd had it. And I believe he had tried to convince me to get a CPAP. A bunch of doctors were at the time. And then they kind of gave up. But it's like I was staying with my mom at the time, and our house is filthy. And so I didn't feel like I could keep a CPAP clean. I was worried to get a lung infection from that, because when I say filthy, I mean she hasn't vacuumed in years because she's worried it'll set off her asthma. It's like, yeah, it might make your asthma worse in the moment, but your asthma's going to get worse from having a filthy house. She's also just been overwhelmed and depressed and refuses to take medicine for depression or anything else, so. But yeah, no, I really appreciate her staying in the ER. That was very nice. And I remember that. Meanwhile, while I was out of town, my Nigerian roommate ate my salmon, which I left behind, which, if I do turn out to have lupus, especially eating 5-day-old salmon coming back, like, it was fresh when I made it, but it had been 5 days since I cooked it when I would have eaten it. I think 4 the day I got back, but then I wasn't going to eat that very night I got back, or very day, so by the time I would have eaten, it would have been 5 days old, which fish starts off with very low histamine levels, but it increases as it ages. Bacteria turn the proteins into histamine, and fish ends up with very high histamine levels if it's kind of old like that, which is a trigger for lupus and a lot of autoimmune diseases, which my PCP thought that there was a possibility of autoimmune diseases and decided to do a panel for a bunch of them. I actually scoffed at the idea of the one that caught my attention was lupus, but I've come around after looking symptoms of it, and I've even had, I didn't understand quite what a butterfly rash is. I've actually had those before. It's like on both sides of the nose and above, but not below. It's the best way I can describe it. Looking it up, and it just looks a little different in white males. It's usually more subtle from the pictures I saw, whereas in women of color, it's very bright and very easy to tell someone's having a butterfly rash, but it's much more subtle and looks almost like a sunburn in white men. Perhaps because, we're pasty and we get sunburned anyways, and, so the redness is less out of the ordinary. Indeed, my skin in that area is usually a little bit red anyways, probably just due to sun. Like, there's just some baseline redness in that part of the cheeks. But I've had it flare up and get much redder. So that's suspicious as well, although I've never had the other type of rash, discoid, except maybe on the top of my head when I was losing hair. I think I might have had a discoid rash up there, which I've also had hair loss that then receded, like the hair loss stopped and the hair came back, which is also a thing that can happen with lupus. So maybe it's possible. And it's funny that I swear I was going to go bald prematurely, and then the hair just came right freaking back in the spot, and then it's going again now. It's thinning right back out. But like very aggressively got thinner, and it was just falling out, and then very quickly came back. It's not hair loss in a normal pattern like male pattern baldness, although that runs in the family, so probably get that later in life. This was, and the fact that sometimes I think once I saw a discoid rash up there does suggest it's some autoimmune thing. Discoid rash is like these red rings is the best way I can describe it, like a disc. It's the only place in my body I've ever seen a rash like that, though, is at the top of my head, and not seen only via like cameras, which when I take pictures of stuff with my cell phone camera, it looks less red, so it's definitely not like it was exaggerating the colors. I look at parts of my skin that I can see are visibly red, and I take a picture and it doesn't, like everything looks washed out on my camera. So the fact that I could see red from the top picture, top of my head, it's pretty clear. In the the ring patterns, it's pretty clear I had discoid rash up there. But that only ever happened once. So normally it's the most common symptom of lupus. Maybe it's a different type of autoimmune disease, or maybe it's just a coincidence. I don't know. And I've said before, I'll eat my hat if it turns out to be lupus, which I don't have a hat. send me links to little sugar edible hats, and maybe I'll eat one on stream and you'll get to see my face, viewers. I don't know. I'm considering it, but there doesn't seem to be any interest even though I mention this, so maybe I don't have a very engaged audience, so why bother? Putting your face out is just a security risk. If no one's gonna even get excited about the idea, I might as well not. So this is the threat of infection exploration for those wondering what the heck is going on, and I'm just grinding up generators, yellow fever, salmonella, tuberculosis. Depending on how I do this, maybe I can get to the third badge, which I never get to before. Maybe not. Probably have to do a lot more in the next day. Next 39 hours, so. Or invest a ton of Darwinium, probably both. Now these badges are useful because they make future runs of the same exploration quicker. And they also speed up the main simulation if you have the right upgrades, which I do. But you have to invest mass amounts of time in Darwinium to get each level of the badge for a very long time anyways. So yeah, I had blood tests though for all the stuff, and a bunch of stuff came back normal, obviously, but I did see low globulin levels with, if anything, above average albumin levels, which is suggestive of some autoimmune diseases, and my total protein was actually on the low end. So it's not even like the albumin reflected overall protein, this A to G ratio being high, it's rare. And one place you see it is with autoimmune diseases. If others are infection, chronic inflammation, which I guess is consistent with long COVID as well, which is what the doctors think for sure that I have, but I may also have other stuff on top of it. Maybe the COVID infection saw both some long COVID and lupus, or maybe most of my symptoms are due to lupus, or it may be just long COVID. There's no blood test or anything for long COVID, and there is for lupus. There's also tests for pulmonary hypertension, which you'd have to stick a cath in your heart. It can cause infections, so I have to. They put me in it for cardiology and consult with all the heart issues I've been having. So when I see the cardiologist, I'm gonna have to. Yeah, look, I've had obstructive sleep apnea witness the first attack 8 years ago, but I probably had it based on stuff like my chronic cough and fatigue that I even saw a doctor in college for. I probably had untreated obstructive sleep apnea going back 17 years. And no, I didn't ever had anyone who could have witnessed it before 8 years ago when I was a coworker, when I was an EMT and we were taking turns napping in ambulance, because I've had no luck with dating, so I never had anyone really sleeping over who could have. I didn't really go any sleepovers or stuff. The only time I've ever slept in a communal setting before, like where someone could have witnessed before taking turns napping with that other EMT when we were stuck in a snowstorm, so we were napping in shifts, was when I was a Boy Scout. When I was a Boy Scout, one of the scouts actually did take a recording of me snoring like a log, and it might have been obstructive sleep apnea then. So I may have had that since I was a teenager. So untreated obstructive sleep apnea for a real long period of time like this can lead to pulmonary hypertension. So I have to be like, look, I have all the symptoms of pulmonary hypertension, and sure, nothing show up in that echocardiogram, but often doesn't in early stages. Just do the cath. Maybe you can, and if the lupus test comes back positive, obviously there'd be a much higher index of suspicion because they don't have two risk factors: obstructive sleep apnea and pulmonary hypertension. I mean, sorry, obstructive sleep apnea and lupus, which both cause pulmonary hypertension. But we'll see. Trying to get stuff treated. Why does it occasionally say 2x on this? Only occasionally. And it does it only in the entropy. So I'm grinding that in parallel with the main simulation with the threat of infection. What I probably need to is reset the main simulation soon, though, to reset these nanobots and use them to get the bat work towards the badge just the way I ever get it. Take a moment to look for golden asteroids that appear sometimes in the scene. They also appear in this one, though. But yeah, so the roommate, anyways, who ate my salmon while I was gone. Then, like, yesterday, I went with my mom to get the blood test for the, this is the day before yesterday, to get the blood test for lupus and other stuff, and stopped by a grocery store on the way back and got some frozen tilapia. And so what does the roommate do? Like, the very next day, he puts up my frozen tilapia and he's thawing it with, like, my other stuff of his he's thawing. I'm like, why is my frozen tilapia out there? He's like, oh, I just forgot to put it back in the fridge. I don't believe it. I think he was planning on eating my tilapia. He ate my salmon, then he was planning on eating my tilapia. I think maybe the reason he hasn't eaten my food before is because I don't get a lot of meat. But now I was buying meat because the doctor wants me to eat more protein. It was proving too hard to do with like cheese and peanuts. And so I was sucking up, and even though it's putting real pressure on the food stamps I got, which too sick to work, disabled with all my health issues, so that's how I have to pay for food, because you know, I'm already depleting my savings paying for rent. And anyways, but the the roommate, I think this is gonna be a pattern. I'm gonna keep catching him. It's like, I'm happy to help him if I know he's struggling. He's an immigrant who, like, not a permanent resident or anything. He's struggling financially, and he's doing like these under the table contract work, carpentry stuff, and it doesn't pay great. I keep telling him he needs to become a licensed contractor, because then people have to pay him more. He won't listen, or he seems to think he's got very, I think, right-wing beliefs at times. So he probably thinks, oh, those dumb regulations. It's like, no, those regulations exist for a reason, and they protect you. And if you have to do an apprenticeship in carpentry, then go do an apprenticeship. You need to become a licensed contractor. But it's also illegal what he's doing, working on a table, and you could get in trouble for that eventually. So there's also that. But yeah, I'm happy to help him, but he should ask. He should probably ask, hey, can I have some of your, you know, tilapia? And show respect by, you know, asking, but also show respect for he was thawing the whole package of the tilapia, which would leave me with nothing to eat when I need it. And like that's terrible with food safety, which this guy clearly has no idea about. It's become obvious. He does stupid stuff like he would get mackerel and leave it at room temperature for days before cooking and eating it. Not only is that produce a ton of histamine, which is bad, but bacterial overgrowth can make you very sick. This guy has no idea about food safety, especially when it comes to meat. He doesn't seem to understand it needs to be kept refrigerated. I know he's from Nigeria, and he probably thinks, well, we didn't refrigerate the meat there. It's like, and that's why so many people get foodborne illnesses in Nigeria. But the guy probably thinks it's due to like demons or religious impurity or something, because he's like a super evangelical. It's like, no, it's due to bacteria. I know he understands sort of what bacteria are, but he doesn't seem to. He's still got very superstitious beliefs that. And at the same time, he doesn't understand infectious diseases to the level of like knowing when something isn't contagious. He keeps thinking if he gets COVID, it'll be from me because of my long COVID. It's like, no, long COVID is not contagious. I've kept trying to tell him. It's like, no, I'd have to be an idiot to believe that. It's like, no, actually. Thinking this to myself, I'll bite my tongue. You'd have to be a fucking moron to think that long COVID is contagious. This just shows how this guy is not the brightest bulb. And he refuses to listen about these scientific things. He'll probably think that lupus is something contagious too. especially if it was set off by a virus. It's like, no, it's not a virus. It's not contagious. It's a genetic condition. He doesn't ever seem to understand what I mean when I say genetic condition, and he kind of half listens. But as I said, I'm happy to share my food with him. Although money's tight, so he can't overdo it, but especially expensive stuff like meat, but he needs to ask. Especially so I have a heads up on when it's happening, so I know what to replace, and so I can say, wait, no, money's too tight. Well, I can help a little, and it can become a trade situation where sometimes then he lets me eat a little of his stuff, so it evens out to some degree. And mutual benefit, where it may help him more than he helps me, it would still be mutually beneficial that way. But trading of foodstuffs, like informal, like, let him have a little of this and I have a little of that. It's not like I'm selling the snap or something dumb, which is illegal. But you can offer someone, like, you make a PB&J sandwich and offer me a PB&J sandwich kind of thing. It's like as a friend, it's not, no one's going to get mad at you, and that's not. But anyways, I'm trying to be friends with this guy and trying to have peace, but the fish is important because I can't easily get it like Whole Foods. When you Amazon order, the meat is way too expensive, so meat is hard for me to replace. And the fish definitely can't sit out like that, like at room temperature, just thawing on the kitchen table, because that produces lots of histamine, which may set off, if I have an autoimmune disease, make me very sick. So he can't do that shit. And of course, he was doing that shit because I don't know. I've said that before, there's a transactional nature, but how he thinks about things. But honestly, it's greed. He's getting infected with the greed of this country, and, well, honestly, Nigerian culture can be very like that too. It shares a lot with American culture in that way. This isn't some racist thing, because American culture is worse in this regard. USA, we promote psychopaths to positions of power and fucking worship them if it's like Donald Trump. Or Stephen Miller, that bald piece of shit. He needs to be rot in a jail cell somewhere. Instead, I'm sure, well, not I'm sure, it's already a fact at this point that Stephen Miller has been behind multiple war crimes in foreign countries the U.S. has done, and now he's talking about a campaign against the left and to round up those evil communists. He's talking about Americans. He's talking about rounding up and basically imprisoning and killing American leftists. This guy is, I mean, that's even beyond the limits of what you normally hear in U.S. politics. People don't care if someone overseas gets murdered, but domestically, that's usually off limits. He's trying to create a third Red Scare, which communism, socialism is not the enemy. If you're listening to this, viewers, somehow, and you're someone who thinks communism and socialism are not your enemy, they're not the bad guys, they're not predatory, they're your friends, they're your allies, they're the people who are sticking up for you, they're the people who are going to help you, they're the people who are going to save your life so you don't end up dead on the streets, homeless, when you hit misfortune, because that's what unbridled capitalism will do. And I'm not talking social democracy, let's just have a generous welfare state. Those socialists will often push for that if they're evolutionary socialists. That is, most democratic socialists are evolutionary. At best, or worst, depending on how you look at it, they're like me, primarily evolutionary socialists, but they're not going to raise an eyebrow if someone succeeds in a revolution. Power to them. The cost of the revolution is already a sunk cost. That is, whoever died, whoever, that's already happened. It's in the past. Would not have recommended it because it was unlikely to work out. But the reason it shouldn't be attempted is partly because the vast majority of revolutions fail and a whole bunch of people die for nothing. Capitalism has to go, or it will destroy the planet. It will murder billions. Billions will die because of climate change if capitalism is not abolished. So yes, revolutions are valid, but I'm not going to encourage anyone to do them because they're just going to fail and get themselves killed. It's freaking stupid to to go aiming for revolutions in our current world with the massive security states, the intelligence apparatuses. That's not going to change. It's unlikely to work even in a much less oppressive, much less Orwellian Big Brother's watching world. And that's not the world we live in. We live in a world where NSA is many times as large as the CIA, and no one even freaking knows what they're doing half the time. And the CIA, no one knows what they're doing half the time. Except that they're always messing with politics in foreign countries, creating color revolutions and bullshit like that. The Ukraine war is very much a product of the CIA, which people say, no, the Russians are evil. It's not an either or. The Russians can be evil, and Euromaidan can still be a result of a CIA influence operation. Those things are not mutually exclusive. And Russia is, of course, run by Putin, who is one of the people who stole everything that wasn't nailed down after the Soviet Union fell. He's no communist. He's a bad guy. He is one of the people the Soviet Union should have put in jail before it fell. Vladimir Putin is a monster. He was, I think, in the KGB at the very end of the Soviet Union, but he's one of the people who should have been, declared a traitor of the revolution, if anything. And he was someone who, as soon as Soviet Union was falling, he proceeded to steal and steal and steal and work with organized crime and murder. And that's the opposite of, and do it all for his personal interests too. That's the exact opposite of what a communist or a socialist is. Vladimir Putin is a monster. But that does not change the fact that the US created the Ukraine war, the situation that led to it, knowing that setting up a NATO country on the borders of Russia would be too much, which is, that's what Russia is worried about, is that first Ukraine will be brought into the EU, and then it'll be brought into NATO, and then there'll be NATO bases right against the Russian border, which is just not acceptable. And they already have NATO bases right against their borders in Finland and in the Baltic countries, and they don't need Ukraine too. The US is trying to encircle them, trying to destabilize them, because we are a global empire, and our ruling elites are determined to conquer the world. Slowly, but, and very, 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 very incompetently, but they're determined to conquer the world. Of course, they'll fail. The momentum is very clearly showing that they're going to fail, but they'll kill a lot of people and make the world a lot worse before they do. In fact, failing empires, collapsing empires, which US is in the early stages of, are often the most vicious, the most aggressive empires. Because they think if they just kill more people, that they'll stop their empire from falling. And while that, if they did that earlier, maybe it might have worked. They invade enough countries, conquer enough territory. By the time empires start doing it to stop themselves from collapsing, it's already far too late for that to work. And all it does is kill a bunch of people. It's possible if the US had, annexed the Philippines instead of turning them into a neo-colony after, it genocided 1 million people in the Philippines when the Philippines tried to declare independence after the Spanish-American War. The US had annexed them after that, then, maybe the US empire would be not as close to collapsing today, because there'd be cheap labor in the Philippines, or if it didn't become another state and become developed. If it did, it'd be a source of tax revenue. If it remained poor, it'd be a source of cheap labor. Either way, it would stabilize the empire. Would have stabilized the empire. And, if the Bay of Pigs invasion had worked and Cuba was maybe back to being directly occupied by the US, like Puerto Rico is, and Cuba once was. And I'm not saying any of these things are good things. They're terrible things. But I'm saying if the empire wanted to stabilize itself through violence and oppression, the time to do that was decades, generations ago. At this point, all it's going to do is cause bloodshed for no reason. Not that an empire is worth killing for in the first place. It's not. The time for that stuff strategically was long ago at this point. The US ruling class just need to accept that their time is come and gone, and they're going to be in charge of a declining empire. And if they do it the way the British did, realizing ahead of time that they can't stop the decline, then a lot fewer people die, and it'll be a much softer landing. And heck, now the British are trying to rebuild their empire now. At least the fascists want them to. because they had a soft landing from the collapse of the empire, because they didn't try and flail and hold on to an empire that they couldn't hold on to anymore. Gosh, now of all the stupid things, I'm thinking of the Civ 4 mod Rise and Fall, where you can sometimes stabilize a collapsing empire by releasing territories before you get to the edge of collapse, which is counterintuitive to how you normally play Civ. And stupidly, certain territories ought to be part of certain nations, but aren't. They just become like these little independent cities that do nothing and just wait to be conquered by an empire. But, some point I'm going to go and do some more Civ 4 streaming. I still have a lot of videos in buffer for my Civ 4 playlist, and I have to get back to that campaign eventually, and I wanted to do Fall from Heaven 2, Rise and Fall, recontinue my Afterworld series. There's a lot to stream of that game. Yeah, well, anyways, I will be eternally grateful to my mother for staying with me in that ER, even if I wanted her to just go and get more rest, because it'd be easier for her. Still a really nice gesture, and less scary than sitting there in the hospital on my own, like the other 5 times, with a disease that I don't even know what the heck is going on. I know it's not acid reflux. The fact that on the way down to visit my grandfather, laying flat helped, proves that. And other times, laying flat generally helped with the chest pain and symptoms. And I would get really dizzy, and the chest pain get worse if I stood up. And it doesn't appear to be a heart arrhythmia driven, although sometimes I get palpitations around it because the EKGs usually come back normal. So initial theory that it might be supraventricular tachycardia, with some of the times I was tacking out with some of these episodes. Unlikely. That was probably just my adrenaline running and normal elevated heart rate because something was going on, not enough oxygen to the brain. And it wasn't panic attacks, though. One of the doctors in one of the ERs tried to think it was. It's like, no, this definitely isn't. I was deadly calm then, and every one of the other times. Except, well, the very first time this happened, when it scared me the most, because, you know, suddenly my chest was hurting really bad, and my heart was packing out. But what happened, you know, a couple of the times is that chest pain and inability to breathe triggered panic attacks. Panic attacks didn't trigger the chest pain and inability to breathe. And that didn't happen every single one of these episodes. It didn't happen the latest one, for sure. It didn't happen the one before that. Maybe 3 out of the 6 times there have been panic attacks that accompanied this. And they accompany it because it's really scary not being able to breathe and having your chest hurt, which is, it's basically, you don't actually feel your heart, but you feel chest pain, which is your heart hurting, basically. And knowing that that's basically my heart, and knowing that I can't breathe and then my chest hurts, of course that's going to be scary. So that's setting off a panic attack when I don't get that 3 out of 6 times is not surprising. The other 3, it definitely didn't. And even afterwards, I was still having chest pain. I was completely calm. And the other 3 times, I didn't have panic attacks at all accompanied with it. So it's not that, although one of the doctors don't listen to patients. They try and dismiss them. They try and have things and blame the victims, which in some doctors' mind, a panic attack blames the victims. They seem to think that people are full control of that. And not, you know, well, the brain's inflamed because of long COVID and possibly, maybe, as it turns out, lupus. And that's going to lead to abnormal regulation of stuff like adrenaline, and yeah, you can get a panic attack in that situation if something really scary happens. It doesn't mean that it's in my control, or I did something wrong, or I'm just anxious, or whatever crap. And when I was sitting there with my mom, I was actually bored while I was in the ER. Bored out of my mind, and just sitting there, sort of watching a TV show that was muted out of the corner of my eye a little bit, just completely bored, and the chest pain came back. It definitely wasn't panic attack. But, you know, some people want to say that because it gives them an out for it to not be in their court. They think if it's a panic attack, it's just in the patient to breathe slower or something. They're lazy doctors. They're bad doctors. I was trying to become a physician before I got very sick, and I would have made an excellent one. I was very observant, good at listening to patients, and being very kind to them. Had good bedside manner. I was terrible when I was an EMT with my coworkers sometimes because I was too much of a hard ass. You have to do things the right way because it's what's best for the patient. And a lot of my partners wanted to cut corners, and I didn't have much tolerance for stupid people doing things the wrong way in ways that would hurt patients. If it mattered, I was going to give them an earful, and that wasn't great. It was a little too much stick up my ass, but in the way I handled it anyways. But it doesn't change the fact that I was excellent with patients. I was very observant. I had a very, very keen mind with a superb, phenomenal MCAT score, actually. And, well, the third time I took it, a phenomenal MCAT score, very strong. Though, or no, third, sorry, the second time. That was only the second time. Why did I say third? Well, practice test, but second time I took the MCAT, phenomenal MCAT score, and a very strong one the first time as well. And I was doing a special master's. I was getting straight A's and a clinical research program as well, and getting straight A's. And I already had a master's degree. I went to an excellent undergrad school, and actually a very good grad school. I was definitely going to become a physician, and then I got very sick. So I feel a little bit entitled to criticize jackasses who want to cut corners and just blame panic attacks for things just because it's an easy out for them. But there's something more going on, for sure. And yes, I can work myself up about illness, but my talking and thinking about it does not show anxiety. Anyways, I find it interesting. I find it a puzzle. And this talking angry, this is anger, if you guys aren't clear. Not anxiety, but anger at these morons who don't want to do their job right and don't want to actually figure out what's going on with a patient. And there's a lot of things, you know. Whether the pattern of how these episodes have happened, where it seems they can't usually happen again right after one happens, unless I overdo, like, after, let's see, this would be the after the third ER admission, was in the day what became the fourth, and actually after the fourth such attack, what would have been the fifth, because there's one I didn't go to the ER for. So after the fifth one of these, or what would on the fifth one of these episodes, say that right? Anyways, I had some coffee, and coffee had been a factor, maybe. The very first time this happened was like 6 cups. Second time happened, 2 really strong cups of coffee. And the second time happened, it was like 6 cups, and it may have been a factor there. But the third time it was only like 2 cups of coffee again, which is a perfectly normal amount for someone with a healthy heart. And then the third time I had 1 cup of coffee. The next day I thought, well, it can't happen again, because in the past I could never have another one of these right after, and it had another attack. So, and then another one later at the end of that week with no coffee in the system. And that was one where I was bored out of my mind. Definitely not anxious. But after 2 with coffee, the doctor's like, oh, it might be anxiety attacks. Like, no, it's not. Just because I'm caffeinated and irritated at you guys and talking a little fast, because I've always tended to talk a little bit on the faster end. I'm a very verbal person. It's not anxiety, no matter how you want to put it. I have a brain that works fast at most things, so that nowadays there's some executive functioning and psychomotor functioning. They're both impaired at work at reduced rate, according to the neurologist. So I don't move fast anymore, but I still can end up talking fast. I move fast. I mean, I did sprints in high school. I was a sprinter. and I was always extremely agile and very fast. And now any motorized task is a struggle for me. I have to move slow because my brain processes body movements slower and can make me klutzy if I try and do things too quick. And apparently that part of my brain is working slower according to the testing. So not surprising. As well as some executive functioning stuff that can be mistaken for memory issues, but apparently isn't. There's nothing wrong with my memory proper, the neurologist said. I had been saying before to you guys, it's probably I got memory issues from long COVID. Turns out it's not actually memory issues. It's an executive function thing that looks like a memory issue. But I can be forgiven for mixing those up since they're pretty similar. The neurologist even said they're pretty similar and they can be mixed up. Yeah, so I don't know what's causing this. It was scary, obviously, to be in the R's and have an unknown illness, and yeah, something going on. Even when I was, bored at the moment, is still the fact that there've been the chest pain stuff. It's a scary situation. And there's definitely something going on. The patterns of it suggested possible autoimmune disease to the PCP. And there's some blood work stuff. In fact, my spleen was enlarged like 6 years ago, a year before I got long COVID or whatever it was. Right before the pandemic in 2020, I ended up in the hospital with profuse vomiting, like just very, very heavy vomiting that came out of nowhere. And apparently my electrolytes got screwed up by this, and I was like shaking stuff because my potassium and sodium levels and stuff were just way off because I had vomited so much, according to the blood work. But anyways, so I was in the ER, and afterwards, because I was having some pain in like my abdomen, they checked, and it turned out my spleen was enlarged, almost like borderline splenomegaly, which is like where they do the clinical cutoff for calling it like pathogenic levels enlargement, but it was bigger than it should have been, which can happen with some autoimmune diseases that destroy red blood cells, such as lupus. So it may have all started even back then. That may have been like the first time that it triggered. Probably was studying really hard and not sleeping enough, under a lot of stress, because I had my I was at the very top of my program with straight A's, and I had like a target in the back of my back basically for that. There were people who tried to sabotage me because of it and lie about me, and they did it about I was actually friends with the guy who was #1 in the program. And I was number 3, and there was somebody else was number 2. He managed to avoid that because he basically tutored a lot of the guys in the program, and so nobody targeted him because he personally helped them do better. But me and the other guy, who was #1, who had just the very highest exam scores every single exam, and we were actually friends, the two of us, and stayed together sometimes, but not really like talking to each other, just more like studying in the same room. Which I can see how that would make some people even more resentful. They probably figured we were helping each other do better or something instead of them. It's like, not really. But we did enjoy each other's company. But anyways, so I was under a lot of stress, and my roommates had threatened to poison me a couple times because they were just total jackasses. They'd kind of sneakily implied that they might put Visine in my water, which is a type of poison. It's like, you're not going to detect it. And at the time, I thought that maybe the vomiting could have been that maybe they actually did put somehow poison me, because they'd been threatening to do so. Very directly threatening to poison me. I could have called the cops, but how I could have proven it, I didn't record them at the moment they said it. But in hindsight, it might have been the first sign of autoimmune disease, such as lupus, being under massive stress. Eventually I got out of that apartment in the second year of the pandemic. I was in a much better apartment, and they only had one roommate, and I normally got along with the guy, but the guy was a bit of a moron. Reminds me of the Nigerian roommate I got now. This guy was ex-Army Special Forces. Not the brightest bulb, and he didn't think that you could get COVID more than once, even when I showed him studies that proved he could. And so he wouldn't take proper precautions, and when he got COVID inevitably, he wouldn't quarantine outside the apartment. He's like, oh, you can't get it again because you got it once. It's like, that's bullshit, man. You can get it more than once. I've told you this before. And predictably, I got COVID from him, and that was my second COVID infection. That's what I got really sick after, and just fatigue and brain fog that made it impossible to finish school. Which, whatever's going on with my neurology now, some symptoms have gone away since then. I definitely couldn't think clearly at the time. The neurologist also said, well, these are the primary issues with your brain. If you get really fatigued, a lot of other things can go wrong. So it's not like, you know, the other difficulties thinking clearly. With the severe fatigue, other parts of my brain can be impaired when I'm really fatigued. And experiencing lightheadedness and stuff like that. And headaches. And anyways, so part of me almost hopes like the lupus test comes back positive. Not that I want to have that disease, but it's treatable. And I already have a disease, for sure. Clearly, I'm very sick. I'd rather have a disease that's treatable and that's better understood than a disease that a lot of doctors still go around acting like it's not a real disease, that is long COVID, and that has no treatment, has no cure, and has no diagnostic test. At least something that's got a confirmed diagnosis, diagnostic test, and a confirmed treatment. Like, doctors are much more likely to take it seriously because, one, it can be proved with the diagnostic test, and two, there's something they can do about it. When doctors can't do anything about an illness, they're more likely to pretend it's not real. So long COVID, both there's no treatment and there's no diagnostic test yet. Although I wouldn't be surprised there's efforts to try and have a diagnostic test with a high false negative rate, so they can say a lot of people have long COVID don't when they develop one finally. The problem is when you're developing the test in the first place, you have to decide how accurate it is in terms of false negatives, and that partly is based on who you think really has disease to begin with. If you decide a lot of people who actually are sick aren't, then you can say that you don't have a high false negative rate when you do, when you're designing the test. So, I know this was doing a clinical research program. Part of what I looked at is how diagnostic tests are first developed. There's always assumptions that go into your science. You always got to know what your assumptions are if you want to do science well. Of course, by the time people get really good at science, they're pretty old. This is why, once upon a time, I wanted to go into research with stem cell stuff that I hoped could extend human lifespans, prolong them. And not just like you're really old and sick for longer, but like healthy years, regenerative medicine. Stuff like being able to repair the damage after a heart attack, because if you have a heart attack, a lot of times you're hurt, it's less functional, and you're like weakened and sickened the rest of your life. So being able to repair the damage after heart attacks is actually something in the clinical research program. Even we had to come up with a theoretical clinical trial, and so I developed one based on this, based on the actual stem cell research science that could actually do that. Like, that hasn't been tried yet, but something that actually might have a potential for success. But to this day, the research moves way too slowly because it takes people a long time to master science, and honestly, we live in a society that has a really terrible education system. People don't get a good education like in high school, elementary school, and by the time they get to college, it's kind of too late. They're not taught to think clearly. High school is not about teaching you to think. It's about creating little cogs to roll into the machine of industry. In fact, our whole education system works for what's best for the capitalist class, not what's best for society as a whole. By the capitalist class, I mean the billionaires. Our education system does what's best for billionaires who sit on the board of trustees of universities and make the gigantic donations to universities and control the politicians and the government bodies through sometimes regulatory capture, where lobbyists end up cycling to work in industries. So both through lobbyists and regulatory capture and owning the politicians, Billionaires also controlled the government, which regulates the universities. So the universities in the United States are not so free. Not at all. You guys should read Michael Parenti. He says some excellent stuff about how academia is not as free as people think it is in the US. Indeed, he was pushed out of academia because he was a Marxist and censorship. You should still read what he has to say. He's a brilliant mind, and he should have, absolutely should have gotten tenure. And there are people who talk about it who like vouched for him, and he absolutely deserved to not get pushed out again. There were times like he was going to get tenure, and then it came up for review, and then someone on the board of trustees like vetoed it and had him forced out of the university, which very often happens after you fail to get tenure, because of his political stances. Even though his scholarship was excellent, it's not a free country, and especially it wasn't during the Cold War when he did most of his career. But I got news for you guys: the communists were the good guys in this Cold War. They were the less evil side, anyways, the lesser of two evils, and the one that had the potential to grow into something much more beautiful and humane than the Soviet Union was. If they had won the Cold War, they might have mellowed out, and democratic socialists might have been able to come into more power. And people like Gorbachev wanted to make the Soviet Union kinder and gentler, but he managed to collapse it in trying to do so. But if the U.S. wasn't around to destabilize attempts at reform, and indeed some of the people in Gorbachev's cabinet were actively trying to collapse the Soviet Union because they were working with the CIA in that regard, especially his head of media reform was secretly, he wasn't working with the CIA directly, but he wrote in his memoirs, like when he was getting close to death, that he was actually trying to collapse the Soviet Union from within. And there were people doing that, and that wouldn't have happened if the Soviets already won the Cold War. So it had the potential to mellow out versus what has actually happened. The U.S. won the Cold War, and what have we done? We fucking continued genociding countries. We're supporting Israel. We supported genocide in Congo. We supported genocide in Yemen, where U.S. bombers were helping the Saudis starve an entire country to death. That's why the Houthis hate us, and now they're helping the Iranians because we tried to do a genocide in Yemen. And we have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the evil we did during the Cold War was not just because we had to defeat the communists, supposedly. It was because we were evil, and we were going to continue doing evil even after the communists were out of the picture. And we have. We were the bad guys. There's an excellent book on this, The Triumph of Evil, and it talks about this. The U.S. was the bad guys. We should not, if good was always the side that won, then we should not have won the Cold War. The bad guys won the Cold War, and that was us, or our government, because it's not you and me. It's not little old Americans, waving the flag, although some flag waving can get into hyper-patriotism. It's the billionaires. It's the Rockefellers. It's the Milans. It's the Musks, it's the Bezos, it's those people. They're the ones who really are in charge, and they're evil, and they're the people who won the Cold War. Not you and me. We didn't win it. We're suffering for the loss of it. I mean, the one of it. We're suffering for our side winning. We're suffering for the loss of it by the Soviets. Because the Soviet Union is no longer in the picture, the U.S. ruling class no longer has to take decent care of its workforce because there's very little potential of if things had gotten as dire as they are now, the Soviets could have sent in propaganda and money and material, and they could have helped there be a communist revolution in the U.S. There's no potential for that anymore. There's no Soviet Union to aid revolutionaries. Therefore, the ruling class can absolutely crush ordinary people. You think it's bad now, it's going to get 100 times worse. And the Soviet Union isn't around to help put a stop to it. Evil won the Cold War, and we will suffer for it for generations. You and me, ordinary people. And until we acknowledge that the wrong side won the Cold War, there's not even the hope of changing the path that history is on. So do keep that in mind, beers. Alright, well. And I'm a democratic socialist. I think the Marxist-Leninists, they tend to get into oligarchies that don't lead to democracy, but capitalism will destroy the planet, and Marxist-Leninism is not the only way to do Marxism. I prefer the evolutionary socialist path. I don't think the DSA is going to succeed in turning the U.S. into a socialist country. It would be beautiful if it did, but it probably won't work. But I think it's nicer and worth trying to stick with. And I think revolution is doomed now that the U.S. has won in the Cold War. In all our history, the Soviet Union is still around. Revolution might not be doomed. But that's not the world we live in. And so a lot of people are going to die because climate change is going to lead to massive famines. And in the oil running out, you think it's bad now with like the Strait of Hormuz being partially shut down? Wait till you see how expensive food gets when the oil starts to run out. And capitalism will mean that the system won't take the necessary steps to keep people from starving to death. Billions will die, and it will all be because of capitalism. It will be a political choice not to deal with the crises in a way that saves lives. And it will be a choice that's made by billionaires who own the politicians. Get this into your heads, viewers. All right, well, enough of this for now. Chill out, maybe have a tiny snack, brush my teeth and floss for night because too much food and my acid reflux will make me miserable. And no more ranting. I played this game to rant. I'll probably do some Kerbal Space Program and just chill out the rest of the night. Maybe some Hearthstone. And hopefully I just noticed that Douglin is working. Hopefully I haven't annoyed him with this rant. I'm just in an irritated mood that no one ever considers things could be different. That the people are too content with the world they live in the U.S. All right, well, until next time, viewers, take care of each other, be kind to yourselves, and may you always find a guiding star to lead you on. I do. Best luck to you all.